All right, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your patience. You can go ahead and grab your seat. We're going to get started with today's session on housing vouchers and other sources of rental assistance. Again, if you're in the back and you have any difficulty hearing, I'd encourage you to go ahead and take a seat or move up forward. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm going to turn it over to our presenters.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. My name's Ann Watts. I am happy to follow up on many of you may have known me from my work at the Colorado Division of Housing. I retired from there about 6 months ago and have started a new consulting practice called Inclusive Community Solutions. So today, as easy as it might be for me to slip into we at DOLA, I'm going to try to avoid that and stick to just some general information about housing vouchers. And I think we have a kind of a broad range of folks here, so I want to make sure that we hit some of the basics. So first off, housing voucher is basically rental assistance, right? The program will pay the difference between reasonable rent and what the individual can afford in their household. It's based on payment standards. There's all kinds of different schedules posted. That assistance is ongoing. So as long as you're qualified, you stay in compliance, you will keep that voucher for the rest of your life if you need it. And they can be either tenant-based, which means the person gets the voucher and then they go find a unit, or they can be project-based, which means the voucher is attached to a unit. And you may see that in some, for example, Section 811 program properties. They're provided primarily by housing authorities, mostly by local housing authorities, as well as the state's Department of Local Affairs Division of Housing. And Courtney here will represent that organization today. Most of them are funded federally through HUD. So they're called a housing choice voucher if they come through that program. They used to be called Section 8. So you might be more familiar with them with that name. But in addition to that, there are vouchers at DOLA funded by the state's general fund that are designed to help people with disabilities. And they can be a great resource if you know how to find them. So those are called the Community Access Team vouchers. They're kind of a hybrid where DOH actually gets referrals from HCPUF through the case management system. And then DOH manages those applications. And then their local contractors manage the day-to-day of the vouchers. So how do you get a voucher? I know I have a lot of information on these slides. I tried to make this as a good reference for you. I'm going to hit the highlights because we are a little short on time. Sorry for starting late. But I think the key important point is, first off, apply to every single housing authority that you can identify in the area that you're willing to live. HUD publishes a list. There's a website there. You can also reach out to Division of Housing to get information on the contract agencies that might work in your areas and where they exist and how you can reach them. And then when you apply, it's a pre-application process. So you're going to give just a few basic important bits of information. And once you actually get your name gets pulled off the waiting list for a voucher, the housing authority will then ask you for more detailed information. So it's really important while you're on that waiting list to make sure whatever housing authority that you've applied to has the most up-to-date contact information. So if that changes, make sure you update them. And you also need to make sure that you have your documentation ready to go. So if there's any preferences that you checked off. So here's an important thing to know. A lot of housing authorities give a preference to people with disabilities. And so if you check that off on your pre-application, you may get a voucher sooner than someone else who didn't have a preference, but maybe even if they applied sooner. But it's important when you get to the point of actually being pulled from the wait list and being offered a voucher that you can then document that. So just something to keep in mind as you're working through that process. Once you've submitted that full, more detailed application and the housing authority has approved it, they're going to invite you to a briefing or an orientation meeting. And it's important to attend and listen. And that is where they're going to lay out all of the rules for finding a unit, keeping a unit, and working with their agency. Because everyone might, I mean, they're governed by overarching regulations that keep things very similar, but there could be subtle differences between agencies and how they like to manage their vouchers. So listen closely. And all of that, unfortunately, in the can take years easily, which is why I recommended at the start to apply to as many different housing authorities as you possibly can. Because you never know which one is going to have a voucher come available first. So once you've gotten through all of that, you're ready to start looking for a home. If you're in Denver or in any other community or program that offers housing navigation, definitely take advantage of that service. It is just makes an enormous difference for folks to help them find places. You're gonna have a time limit on your voucher. You're gonna have a certain number of days in order to find a home. So the clock does start ticking once you've been at that voucher orientation or briefing meeting. I also wanted to point out, make sure folks were aware, we've hopefully all heard of the fair housing law, and landlords cannot discriminate against folks based on their disability. But there's also been a change in the last few years that added source of income to that statute. And so now landlords also cannot discriminate just because you have a voucher. So keep that in mind as you're searching. And some landlords may need a gentle reminder. Hey, Courtney.
Very gentle.
And often your housing authority can help you with that if that comes to that. But you're gonna have to find a home within the jurisdiction of the housing authority that offered you a voucher. And it's gonna have to have a rent plus utility, so gross rent that's within the payment standard that's published by your housing authority. And it also is gonna have to pass an inspection. So we keep that in mind as you are selecting a unit. Once you've found a unit, there's still more paperwork to do. You will fill out a form that at Division of Housing anyways, we called it a RAFTA, a request for tenancy approval. And the landlord's gonna provide all the details on the apartment so that the housing authority can then review all of that and make sure that the rent is correct, the total payment is affordable. You may end up paying hopefully just 30% of your income. But if for some reason you find a unit that the rent plus the utilities ends up to be a little bit more than the payment standard, you could end up paying up to 40% of your income. So the housing authority is going to review those calculations and make sure that you fit within those parameters. At that point, the housing authority will do their inspection, let the landlord know if anything needs to be fixed. And you'll probably have a draft lease, but whatever you do, don't sign that lease until your housing authority has said, yes, you can sign the lease very clearly, very directly. You want to make sure all those ducks are in a row, all those I's are dotted and T's are crossed before you sign that lease, because you are going to be committed to pay that rent one way or the other from that point forward. And then you get to move in, yay. right? And then the last step that actually usually follows move-in, although it can happen, hopefully will happen very quickly, is that your housing authority will sign a housing assistance payment contract or a HAP contract with the landlord. That has to be signed. I know at DOH, the time limit was 60 days. I think that's pretty common across most housing authorities. If that HAP isn't signed, well, all those lease documents and everything else are fresh, then there could be an issue with your housing authority paying your landlord back to the date you actually moved in. So hopefully something folks won't have to be worried about, but just want to make sure that that's kind of in the back of your head and you're aware of that. And then ultimately keeping a voucher comes down to the basics of being a good tenant and a good neighbor, which hopefully your support service providers can help you with if there's any issues, but also if you have any issues or if your income sources ever change, you have to make sure that you're in touch with your housing authority so that they can adjust your share of the rent accordingly, or they can help you talk through any issues with your landlord, any of those things. That's really a good idea always to be on good terms with your housing authority and be in good communication with them. So for example, if they reach out to you because they have a question or they've heard of something going on, be responsive. And the other thing to keep in mind is that every year from your move-in date, or actually probably 10 months after your move-in date, your housing authority is gonna send you a request for you to update all of your application materials, to update your income and your circumstances so that they can reevaluate your share of the rent moving forward. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that you need to refresh that eligibility every year in order to maintain your voucher. So, yeah, and at that point, if your income changes, your rent may change, and this may be for the better or the worse. Either way, income goes up, income goes down, your share of the rent will change to go along with that. So that is basics. Any cool questions at this point, or? I see a hand in the back.
And then, he needs that daily living support. Is there a way to have someone providing that support for him and be able to let us know with that voucher?
So I heard that. Sure.
It was really wordy, but, so an example, so let's say my son receives a voucher.
Mhm.
He needs 24-hour care support. Would I be able to have that support, a caregiver come in to his home and provide? So is that like combining service, or what does that look like?
So there's two different aspects to that question that I want to get at. First off, I want to make clear that the voucher will only pay for housing expenses. It's not going to help with any other supportive services, unfortunately. And then the other side of it is that, for example, if your son needs a live-in aid, you can request a reasonable accommodation for an extra bedroom in your unit. And then the voucher will, for example, pay for a 2-bedroom unit instead of a 1-bedroom unit. Yep. You could, if there's a no field, not all applications have that. It might be a separate process. But if you simply say the words reasonable accommodation to your housing coordinator, they should be all ears. Right? And they should be able to supply you with, if they have their own form, they may supply you with their own form for you to fill out to request that. You may need to do that also, for example, if you cannot find a unit that's accessible within the payment standard. So below that rent limit. it's not uncommon for to get an approval for a higher total rent based on that need as well.
Great, thank you. I think we'll hold off on any more questions until we've heard from our other wonderful presenters.
My name is Courtney Thomason. I am with the Division of Housing. I am the CAT, which Anne referred to previously. It's the Community Access Team. The CAT and Section 811 and HUPWA Administrator for the Division of Housing. So today I will just be going over the Section 811 Project Rental Assistance Program, which is under the umbrella of the CAT program at the Division of Housing, which then we will segue into a lovely new project that Amanda will be talking about. So Section 811 was a program that was authorized by Frank Melville in 2010, and it went into effect in the fiscal year of 2012, goodness. And it was a demonstration project. And what it was to promote community integration for individuals with disabilities who need housing and are on Medicaid and Medicare services so that they can live independently in society. The key components of the 811 program are going to be a project-based rental assistance. So Anne had mentioned that there are two different types. There is a tenant-based, which is the assistance follows the person around wherever they choose to go. And this one is project-based, and the project-based are attached to the units. So if somebody had the assistance at the unit and they choose to leave, the assistance would not follow them. The assistance is only to qualifying properties. So right now we have 9 properties that are under the S811 umbrella, and they're across the metro area. These units are 30% is what we anticipate individuals paying, so 30% of their income towards rent. It can go higher, as was previously mentioned, if income allows, and if for some reason the payment standard was too high. I do want to mention in these project-based units, we go off of FMR, which is fair market rate in these units and not the payment standard. So that's a little bit of a difference between the tenant-based and the project-based 811. This encourages partnerships with on-site service providers. So it helps connect tenants to job training, case management, life skills coaching, healthcare services, and in-home services as well. And it supports residents in achieving a greater independence and improving their quality of life. So the funding and community integration, so it's funded through appropriations with Congress and local housing authorities. These state agencies, they can apply, so any property or agency that wants to apply for these funds can through an RFA, through the Division of Housing. The community integration limitations for the allocations of units are there can't be more than 25% of the units within the entire building set aside for those with disabilities. So those specific 25% of units can receive the S811 PRA funding. These also must be used for individuals with disability. So it is the supportive housing for individuals with disability, and you must have occupancy preferences for those with disabilities. So there are some criteria for the programs that want to get involved in this that they do have to follow. This is the PRA's Project Rental Assistance. I don't know if I said that, but I love acronyms, as I'm sure we all do. So this is just kind of a quick flow chart of the relationship that we have. So the state agency, which is us, the Division of Housing, we partner with the state Medicaid and Human Services agencies, as well as the owners and the property management. So we as a state agency partner directly with the property management to get all of their lease signing, their use agreements, all of the documentation that they need to become an S811 owner under HUD. The community-based service providers are also going to be in direct contact with the owners as well as the tenants. So the service providers, the community-based service providers are going to be the first point of contact for the tenants if they have any questions or issues. The target populations and referral sources. So the target population is mainly individuals exiting institutions. However, they are also available for those on waivers. So the waivers include HCBS, community, home and community-based services, developmental disabilities waiver, the SLS waiver, and additional referral sources. So additional referral sources are going to be HCPF. That's going to be the main referral source that Anne had mentioned previously. So that's healthcare policy and finance, and that is through the case management system. And that's going to be through transition services. And then the coordinated entry system is going to be the second referral source. So that's going to be those who connect with MDHI, which is the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, to complete a coordinated entry assessment, which was formerly the VI-SPID. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that lovely acronym, but it has now changed to the coordinated entry assessment. And that is maintained by the Denver Homeless Initiative. So there are the two ways that they can get, the individuals can get involved with this. It is through HCPF or through the coordinated entry system through MDHI, which they would be matched with a housing option. So the eligibility criteria for S811 PRA assistance. So the first one is going to be HCBS or FLS eligible. You must also have a verified disability. HCPF, if you are going through the SLS avenue, HCPF will be able to submit the application directly to us, and we will review it as we get it and determine if you are eligible on our end, which includes a verified disability, extremely low income, over 18, but under the age of 62 at the time of lease up. And for these specific units, they are a little bit more strict on the documentation that they do require because they are a federal program. So with these programs, it is required to have a birth certificate, social security card, and a valid government issued ID. On some of our other programs, it's a little bit more flexible and you don't have to have a birth certificate. You can have some sort of alternate document. With this, you also must pass a background check, debts owed, and any SO checks. Something to keep in mind is that once we do approve you, if we've determined that you're eligible, the property that we send you to does have their own eligibility criteria that they are permitted to send you through. So just because we approve you, unfortunately, doesn't mean that the property will. Once referred though, so once referred to DOH and we send out the approval to whichever of the 7, 8, 9 buildings that we have now, we will send the referral and the tenant will then meet with the landlord support team and they'll complete the application together. Then if they are approved by compliance, the landlord will complete a move-in inspection with the checklist. If some of you are familiar with vouchers, an HQS or a housing quality standards inspection is required before move-in, and it must be passed before the lease can be signed. A little bit of a difference with this federal program is that it is just a move-in inspection with the landlord and the tenant and a move-in checklist. So it's a little bit different, and that is something that Division of Housing or whoever the monitor is would review during monitoring. And once everything is complete, you've been approved, you can get the keys and move in. And that's the most exciting part, right? So you've moved in. What do you expect now? Maintain good tenancy. That's one of our main expectations is that you are a good tenant. You know, you pay your rental portion on time. That's one of the main reasons, unfortunately, that people do get terminated is their failure to pay their rental portion on time or failing to notify us if their income or household composition changes. So those are the 3 main things that somebody could get terminated for. So something to keep in mind. Also address any notices that are posted. Many people, they find that if they get a notice posted, they don't want to report it to us because they're going to get in trouble, right? You're not. We just need to know what's going on because many times we can step in and alleviate the situation, or it's a new landlord and they don't know that they should have not posted. So it's very, very important to respond to any notices, keep in communication with the housing coordinator and your property manager. And report any changes in income. That is, again, like I mentioned, one of the main reasons that people get terminated is they don't report things. So that is what we expect after you move in. And then an annual or interim recertification yearly. These are going to be a renewal of everything that you did when you signed up. So you'll submit your family composition, all of your income documents, any medical expenses that you may have. Those are things that you would all submit to us, and we expect it to be submitted on a yearly basis or anytime that it changes. With this S811 program, Division of Housing is more of an oversight. So your main point of contact for these individuals is going to be, like I mentioned, the support team, the on-site staff, and landlords. So with this program, they're going to be the contact to help people facilitate and complete their documents for the year. It is very intense, it's a lot of paperwork, and it's a lot of things to submit, especially if you haven't been living independently, and now all of a sudden, a year later, you have all these documents that you have to fill out, and you may have no idea what you're doing. Which I can definitely relate, because sometimes I don't know what I'm doing with documents. So just an example is that your annual will be every year on the month of your move-in. So if you move in on November 11th, your annual every single year will be November 1st. So every single year that it will be the same, as long as you continue to reside in that unit. If you move, then obviously your lease update changes and your annual will as well. So the role of the property manager in these specific 811 buildings is a little bit more involved than it would be in a traditional market rate apartment complex. So the role of the property manager is to meet with the tenant, complete the lease signing, complete the move-in inspection. Usually the move-in inspection is completed by somebody from the housing authority, but with these programs, this S811 program, it is completed by the owner or the landlord. That's their responsibility to calculate the tenant portion in accordance with their income. So the 30%, 40%, whatever have you, it is their responsibility to calculate that and communicate it with the tenant. That being said, it is also the tenant's responsibility to ensure that they do know their rental portion, because this is independent living ultimately, and so it is their responsibility to ensure they know what they need to pay. Complete their annual and interim re-examinations or recertifications. You'll hear those used interchangeably. That is also with the support staff. It's not solely on the landlord to help the tenant complete this. The support staff is there for that as well. It's also their responsibility to maintain a nice apartment, right? Decent, safe, sanitary living conditions throughout the property and within the units. Ensure tenant compliance with the lease. Many times, landlords will contact the housing authority and say, I need you to kick this person out. Well, that's not what we're about. And so we do encourage them to work with the client, but ultimately to follow the terms of their lease. Conduct tenant conferences regarding any posted notices. This is a little bit of a difference between the S811 program and the traditional CAT or state housing voucher and housing choice voucher. So normally the housing coordinator would conduct the tenant conference with these individuals, and that's regarding any notices that they were posted. It's just a meeting that's like, hey, what can we do to avoid this in the future? But that is going to be now the responsibility of the landlord and the support staff to determine how they can both come to a mutual agreement on how to prevent whatever the notice was regarding to happen again. And then it is also their responsibility to contact me or us at DOH in the event that there is a vacancy to fill. So I'm going to go ahead and just get going on this because we're running out of time. So supportive services are what you would basically hope that supportive services would do, right? Assist tenants with obtaining any outside services that they need, home health, Medicaid, Medicare, if they are not already involved, which some of those from MDHI, the coordinated entry system, are not. And assist tenants with obtaining any documents that they need for animals. Differences is these are project-based units. These are not CAT or tenant-based units, the 811 program. They utilize fair market rate instead of payment standard. The housing assistance does not follow the tenant, does not require HQS or Inspire. You are unable to utilize an in-state transfer. Once these are attached to the unit, they are attached to the unit. The housing coordinator is their landlord and the support team is their support team on site. This is federally funded, so it is a little bit more stringent. Community access team is state funded, so it's a little bit more flexible. And there's typically no direct contact between tenants and the division of housing unless it's extenuating circumstances. Okay, with that, I'm gonna pass it on.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Ropek, and I'm a project manager with the Broomfield Housing Alliance. The Broomfield Housing Alliance is the housing authority serving the city and county of Broomfield. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about how we plan on utilizing some of these Section 811 vouchers at our upcoming development, The Grove at Cottonwood. So since the very beginning, the intention for this property has always been to create an affordable and supportive housing option for a neurodiverse population. The site has been designed with 40 1- and 2-bedroom rental units, as well as a common house that'll be used to support a variety of programming services and events. Like you heard earlier, the Section 811 program does limit the number of units that you can set aside specifically with these vouchers to 25%. So 10 of our units will be set aside with these vouchers specifically. So you're going to hear a lot more about details of this project later as my colleague Kristen Heiser is presenting the project this afternoon. But what I did want to talk to you about a little bit more in detail is the services aspect of the project, because that having a well thought out services platform really does or is important in utilizing the voucher program. So the intended site programming is based around a consumer driven service model. And what this does is allow residents to go out into the community to access a variety of diverse range of services that they need to support their individual needs. There will be an on-site resident concierge. That's a new term we're learning in housing. I think we learned it from all the lovely people over at the Kelsey. And so we do intend on hiring that concierge, and they will be an on-site staff member. While not a direct service provider, they will serve as an essential bridge between the housing and services components. They'll guide residents in accessing activities and supports and promote relationship building between residents. The hope is that this program supports housing quality and retention by ensuring residents have the access to the supports they need to successfully live independently at the Grove. We're also hoping that this allows people with and without disabilities to share in and contribute to this interconnected and intentional community. My colleagues and I have been super grateful to have been on this journey from the very beginning with an amazing group of local families, self-advocates, other advocates, and our wonderful local service providers. Through continued conversations and meetings with all of these people, we've been learning a lot about the barriers to housing that exist for people in this community. Just like any other family in our community, general affordability is always an issue, right? But there are some barriers that are or can be unique to this population. We've been learning a lot about how most of our IDD friends either live with aging caregivers, like you've heard today, aging caregivers, group homes, host homes, or in institutional settings. These settings can oftentimes not be ideal, and there aren't really many other options out there.
Beyond unideal living arrangements, we've been learning a lot about the financial resources, or oftentimes lack thereof, that are available to people in this community. We've been learning a lot about SLS waivers and DD waivers and all these state programs that as housers never really came to the forefront in our conversations before diving into this project. So it's definitely been an education. Let's see. So through that slide. Yeah, so in addition to all the people I just talked about, we have been very carefully putting together our team to help us with the Grove. And you're going to hear a little bit more about this later, but I just wanted to touch on this slide in relationship to how our partners interact with vouchers. So let's see. So we looked for long and hard actually for a development partner. We really understood that we needed somebody coming into this that had the capacity and the empathy and the willingness to look at housing in a really new way with us. And they also had to be well-versed in vouchers. We selected Blue Line Development because they checked all of these boxes. I shout out to Gabby, who's in the room with us today from Blue Line. And they also have a really robust property management department that is used to managing voucher programs. As we looked for an architect, we knew we wanted somebody who was experienced in building intentional communities. But the other thing they had to know about was all the accessibility items, and then also requirements that come with using like state and federal funds. For those who aren't super familiar with vouchers, there are a lot of I guess, requirements on what must be included in units to make them eligible for voucher holders to rent. So things like that. Probably really importantly, actually, one of the things we did early on was bring on a financial consultant who had a vast array of knowledge dealing with low-income housing tax credit projects, which is the main financing source we're using for the Grove. This and all of those projects probably had vouchers involved. So if you're going to venture into this world, it's probably essential that you have somebody that understands the financing of low-income housing tax credit projects. It's rather complicated, especially if you want to use vouchers in your underwriting. There are a lot of regulations that come with vouchers that an experienced consultant can help you navigate. Like, for example, having a certain number of Section 811 vouchers in your project could trigger Davis-Bacon wages, which is a cost that can significantly increase your development budget. So those are the kind of things you probably want to know about upfront and not find out like later down the road. And then on this last bullet point, we hired a consultant that's very familiar in working with the IDD community. You guys all saw her earlier this morning. Her name is Desiree. And we found this important in addition to all those listed in the first bullet point, because Desiree has worked across the country, seen a lot of different projects, worked with a lot of different people, and has seen how different models can work. Next slide. Okay. So why did we choose these vouchers? Several reasons. Vouchers, these vouchers very specifically were designed to work with people with disabilities. Sorry. And one of the things we liked about them is that they work really well if you already have access to waivers, state waivers. We found out through a lot of conversations that a lot of our future hopeful residents already are accessing these type of waivers. So hopefully that will give them a leg up when trying to access these vouchers in the future. These vouchers can provide a significant amount of subsidy for individuals, which is kind of, you heard a little bit about earlier how the vouchers work, but the subsidy piece is really important. It's really exciting because somebody who's making 30% of the area median income can afford to live in a typical VITEC unit. For those of you who aren't aware, like 30% of the AMI in Broomfield County is just over 27,000. So if you make 30% or less, you qualify for these, and you only spend, like they said, 30% of your income towards rent, no matter what the rent amount is, unless you go over. I mean, there's all kinds of layers to this, but the next piece of it is that it aids in our underwriting process. So this is great for us because it includes, or it allows units which would have otherwise had very, very low rent amount to increase the rent the owner's receiving up to, not the payment standard, the fair market rent, right? So what this does is it brings more income into the property to support the general operations. And lastly, the 811 program is available to BHA. As a grantee to the state, all of our voucher programs are run through the state, and we currently don't have the ability to project-based regular housing choice vouchers at any of our sites, maybe in the future. So the 811 program offered us the ability to project-based vouchers at this site. Sorry, I'm like trying to hurry through this. So actually, I'm just gonna skip this slide since we're short of time. You guys heard a lot about all of the requirements that go into running a voucher program. A lot of voucher programs have the same like overall process with all the paperwork that comes with it. Then you have to do the screenings, you have to inspect the units, all that kind of stuff. So again, this is one reason we really wanted to hire a partner and property manager that had a lot of experience in this area. It is a lot of work. So next steps with the Grove. We have not broken ground yet. We are planning to second quarter of next year. And one of the things we'll do as we kind of approach the lease-up process is reevaluate our tenant selection plan. We have a tenant selection plan already. We'll make sure that it incorporates any new rules or regulations that have gone into effect between now and then. One of the other things I'd like to mention as far as our tenant selection plan goes is that you heard a lot from Courtney about the referral agencies. What we are doing in Broomfield is that, yes, there are already baked in referral agencies through the Section 811 program, but we're working closely with our local service partners, Imagine, who you've heard a lot about today, and also Friends of Broomfield to provide a stream of future residents into this program for us as well. One of the things we really want to do is to hold some informational sessions about how to access these vouchers, not just the 811 vouchers, but also the CAP vouchers as well. We found through all of our conversations with our community that knowledge about how to access these vouchers just isn't there for a lot of people. So we want to make that information readily available, especially as we gear up to open the Grove, but also as many of you are doing great work in your community and utilizing some of these resources as well. We will continue to advocate for our friends in the community with IDD. We intend to be back here every year. This is the inaugural one, right? So we intend to be back here every year to share our success stories and how this is working and all of our lessons learned, because this is definitely a huge undertaking and a long process. And then lastly, we hope to create a model that can be utilized throughout the rest of the state. We want to share our information with you. We want to continue to learn from all of you so we can kind of perfect this model and move it forward. And with that, I am done. Thank you guys for coming to the session today.
All right, y'all, thank you so much for joining us for today's session. We will go ahead and break now, heading into our next round of breakout rooms. Hold on just a moment. Let me pull them up in case you need them. So in breakout room number 3, there will be recent case management redesign explained. And breakout room 2, housing navigation services for the IDD population. And breakout room 1, community partnerships, current and future opportunities. So again, thank you so much. If you want to refresh, this is happening again this afternoon. I'm actually in again. Otherwise, have a great next session. I appreciate y'all being here. Hey everyone, one quick reminder, you might see lunch pizza. It's not ready. It's totally new. And then keep that in mind. Good. How are you? Thank you. As a reminder, folks, this is breakout rooms too. So if you're here for housing navigation services for the IDD population, if not, you're in the right room. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. If you're looking for one of the other sections, there are volunteers outside that can help you.
Okay, great. We're just in front. Have you guys been continuing the recording? I do. Or in between, or do we stop and then re-record? It might be nice to break it up. We can do that. Can we do that right now? Okay, break. For my audio note. So make it like okay, we're good. If you are, then fine. But.